Alright, good morning. Hello. Alright. Since we have some time to kill, this is Friday, um, March 25th, and it is 9:45 in the morning, 9:41. My clock seems to be running a little fast, 9:41. I just started my dealy bob here, so in about half an hour or so, we'll be flushing and filling. So if it's 20 till now, so we're looking at 10 after. Okay. Um, we're gonna start something new here. We're going to, we meaning me, I'm going to read from the Reuters uh, news feed, and I'm going to try to be as non-judicial as I can. I've already curated some articles. I haven't read them all, but they're just topically curated, not the actual story themselves. So, but I'm just going to start reading, and maybe we can gain some insight together. Um, I may opine every once in a while if the story suits me. Um, and we're gonna start off with a story about. So let's just start reading. Exclusive. Apple has not fully complied with order to open up App Store. Brussels, March 25th, Reuters, Apple has yet to fully comply with an order to open its App Store to rival forms of payment for dating apps in the Netherlands and faces another fine next week unless it tweaks its proposal, Dutch antitrust watchdog ACM said on Friday. ACM has yet ACM has to date slapped weekly €5 million fines on the iPhone maker since January, with the ninth penalty handed out this week. Apple submitted a fresh proposal to the ACM this week in a bid to halt the sanction. I guess so. Basically, I don't even know what that means. So you'll have to excuse me. I don't care pretty much what Apple does. Story about Amazon here. New York, March 25th. Amazon.com Incorporated workers at the company's JFK 8 Staten Island warehouse started casting ballots on Friday on whether to form a union as labor organizers look to New York for the first ever union victory in the retail giant's 28-year history. As the second largest U.S. private employer, Amazon has long been a focus for labor advocates who hope that a single union victory will spark ongoing efforts across the country. March 25th, well, March 2nd, excuse me, this is an older story. Don't worry about that. Unions. Unions are great. they're voting. Voting is good. Everybody should vote for whatever you can vote on. Voting is just a good thing to do, no matter what it's for. Just vote. Express yourself. Be creative on what you vote for. Alright, so I haven't even started yet, so I guess I should plug this thing in. You're not doing anything until you've done that. Alright. Okay. Alright, now we're done. Now we're doing something, and it is 9:46. So, that literally, yeah, 9:46. So we'll stop this draining at 15 after. So it'll be 10:15, and then we'll start filling at 10:15. Okay. Here's a story. U.S. Senate Democrats press banks to scrap overdraft fees. I'm all for that. A group of U.S. Senate Democrats is pressing large U.S. banks to scrap or significantly reduce overdraft and other fees they charge customers with insufficient funds. In a letter sent to 7 large firms Thursday, the group of 5 lawmakers, including Senate Banking Chairman Sherrod Brown, called for a fairer and more transparent fee structure. Democratic lawyers and regulators are placing heightened scrutiny on bank fees. The group cited recent research from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which found nearly 80% of such fees are charged to only 9% of accounts. The CFPB is currently soliciting public feedback on ways to potentially curtail overdraft and other junk fees, and a House Financial Services Subcommittee will hold a hearing Thursday on the fees. Under political and regulator pressure, several large banks, including some that received letters, have taken steps to curtail such fees. In February, Citigroup announced it would eliminate overdraft fees by this summer. J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo and Company, and U.S. Bancorp have moved to give customers extra time to bring their account balances above zero. Bank of America said it would reduce overdraft fees to $10 from $35 beginning in May and eliminate its non-sufficient fund fees. J.P. Morgan had already taken other steps requested in the letter, such as eliminating non-sufficient fund fees, according to a spokeswoman. But banking groups are resisting government efforts to eliminate overdraft fees, arguing they serve a useful purpose. A majority of consumers who use the product do so knowingly and count on it when unexpected expenses arise. As a result, contrary to what it stated in the letter, the Consumer Bankers Association believes taking action that would dramatically restrict overdraft could force many families out of the well-regulated, well-supervised banking and toward predatory payday lenders, said CBA spokesperson Lauren Bear Bianchi. Copies of the letter were sent to chief executives at J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, Truist Financial Corp., PNC Financial Services Group, U.S. Bancorp, and Charles Schwab Corp. Spokespeople for the other banks either declined to comment or did not respond to a request or comment. You can guess how I feel about that. It's like banks are saying, well, we have to charge people overdraft fees because otherwise, otherwise they would fall prey to to other scenarios of people trying to take their money. So if we don't take their money, other people will try to do it in more predatory ways than us. So that's their argument. That's really what that person said. If we don't do it, someone worse will. There you go. You're never going to find another love like mine. Here's a story. U.S. plans to close, scale back 4 immigrant detention centers, document shows. Well, ice, baby. Washington, March 25th. The United States plans to close a troubled detention center in Alabama and significantly scale back the number of beds contracted at 3 other facilities, citing concerns about conditions, according to an internal government document. According to the document, seen by Reuters, Immigration and Customs Enforcement will discontinue use of the Etowah County Detention Center in Gadsden, Alabama, as it had long been a facility of serious concern due to the quantity, severity, diversity, and persistence of deficiencies. It was pretty fucked up. While the facility does not currently house many detainees, the average length of stay remains high, the draft memo said, adding that the age of the jail and the lack of outdoor space were a particular concern. The memo also said the agency would pause the use of Glades County Detention Center in Florida, where there have been persistent and ongoing concerns related to the provisions of medical care at the facility. In a February 1st letter to Alejandro Mayorkas, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security that oversees ICE, a group of lawmakers said Glades must be closed after complaints about racist abuse of black detainees, the overuse of toxic chemicals, and a November carbon monoxide leak that led to 4 detainees being hospitalized. Immigration advocates have for years raised complaints about a lack of adequate medical care and other problems at several ICE facilities and urged the administration of President Joe Biden, a Democrat, to close down the centers. Concerns have been amplified during the COVID-19 pandemic as Reuters and other outlets reported that ICE's transfer of detainees between facilities exacerbated outbreaks and several immigrants died in custody. ICE currently detains nearly 22,000 immigrants at facilities across the country. Under Biden, ICE arrests and deportations of immigrants living illegally in the United States have plummeted compared with the administration of his predecessor, Republican President Donald Trump. The agency has de-emphasized enforcement against immigrants with no criminal history to prioritize the arrest of those committing serious crimes. The measures are likely to spark criticism from Republicans who have said the Biden administration encourages illegal immigration, pointing to record numbers of migrant arrests at the U.S.-Mexico border, which are expected to rise further this year. Most of the migrants arrested at the border, however, have been immediately expelled under current policy aimed at reducing the spread of COVID-19 in detention settings. An announcement about detention changes was expected on Friday, according to 3 U.S. officials familiar with the matter. ICE did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The document said ICE would also reduce the guaranteed minimum number of beds contracted at the Alamance County Detention Facility in North Carolina and the Wynn Correctional Center in Louisiana, citing in part a reduced number of detainees. ICE under Biden has phased out detention of migrant families and closed a handful of other facilities, some under pressure from local authorities. But advocates say the administration could do more to end detention at centers cited for violations. This month, the DHS Inspector General watchdog urged the immediate relocation of immigrants held in the Torrance County, New Mexico detention facility, citing unsanitary conditions and security lapses. ICE disputed the findings, stating that the watchdog ignored facts presented to it in order to achieve preconceived conclusions. So ICE getting shut down because they can't take care of themselves, which is good. We'll see how far that goes. Here's some war news. Russia signals scaled back war aims. Ukrainians advance near Kyiv. I'm going to mispronounce a lot of this stuff, so hold on, folks. Hold on to your hats. Moscow signaled on Friday it was scaling back its ambitions in Ukraine to focus on territory claimed by Russian-backed separatists as Ukrainian forces went on the offensive to recapture towns on the outskirts of the capital, Kyiv. In the first big sign that Western sanctions on Moscow were impacting investment from China, sources said state-run Sinopec Group, Asia's biggest oil refiner, halted talks on a petrochemical investment and a venture to market Russian gas. In the months since they launched their invasion of Ukraine, Russian troops have failed to capture any major city. Their assault has met stiff resistance from President Vladimir Zelensky's forces and then halted at the gates of Kyiv. The Russians instead have been bombarding and encircling cities, laying waste to residential areas, and driving around a quarter of Ukrainians, 44 million people, from their homes. More than 3.7 million of them have fled abroad, half to Poland, which U.S. President Joe Biden was visiting on Friday. Bed lines near Kyiv have been frozen for weeks, with two main Russian armored columns stuck northwest and east of the capital. A British intelligence report described a Ukrainian counteroffensive that had pushed Russians back in the east. Ukrainian counterattacks and Russian forces falling back on overextended supply lines have allowed Ukraine to reoccupy towns and defensive positions up to 35 kilometers east of Kyiv, the report said. Britain has given Ukraine arms and military training. In an announcement that appeared to indicate more limited goals, the Russian Defense Ministry said a first phase of its operation was mostly complete, and it would now focus on liberating the breakaway eastern Donbass region. The combat potential of the armed forces of Ukraine has been considerably reduced, which makes it possible to focus our core efforts on achieving the main goal, the liberation of Donbass, said Sergei Rodskoy, head of the Russian General Staff's main operational directive. Unprepared troops. A senior diplomatic source in Moscow described the announcement as a possible prelude to a climb down. Their war aims were much wider than Donbass, leaving their force divided with poorly coordinated coordinated attacks on multiple fronts by unprepared troops, the source said. The United Nations said it had confirmed 1,081 civilian deaths and 1,707 injuries in Ukraine since the invasion, adding that the real toll was likely higher. Russia's defense ministry said 1,351 Russian soldiers had been killed, 3,825 wounded, the Interfax news agency reported. Ukraine says 15,000 Russian soldiers have died. Vladimir Borchenko, mayor of Boryspil, an eastern suburb where Kyiv's main airport is located, said 20,000 civilians had evacuated the area, answering a call to clear out so Ukrainian troops could counterattack. Ukrainian forces recaptured a nearby village the previous day and would have pushed on, but halted to avoid putting civilians in danger, he said. On the outer main front outside Kyiv, to the capital's northwest, Ukrainian forces have been trying to encircle Russian troops in the suburbs of Irpin, Bucha, and Hortzimel, reduced to ruins by heavy fighting. In Bucha, 25 kilometers northwest of Kyiv, a small group of Ukrainian troops armed with anti-tank missiles was digging foxholes. Andely told Russians he had enlisted as soon as the invasion began. I told my wife to grab the children and to hide in the basement, and I went to the drafting station and joined my unit straight away, he said. Moscow calls its actions in Ukraine a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. Ukraine and the West say Putin launched an unprovoked war of aggression. Unable to capture cities, Russia has pounded them with artillery and air strikes. Worst hit has been the eastern part of Mariupol, a city of 400,000. It is the biggest Ukrainian city-held city in the territory Russia demands be ceded to the separatists. Tens of thousands of people are still believed trapped with little access to food, power, or heat, while the city around them has been reduced to ruins. Mass grave reports. Mariupol's city council, for the first time, gave an estimated death toll for the bombing of the main theater on March 16th, saying witnesses now said 300 people have been killed, among many hundreds sheltering in the basement. Russia denies blame. The United Nations said it was looking into reports of mass graves inside Mariupol, including one with at least 200 corpses. The cities of Chernihiv, Kharkiv, and Sumy in the east have also endured devastating bombardment. Chernihiv was effectively surrounded by Russian forces, its government said. In Kharkiv, officials said 6 people had been killed by the shelling of an old distribution site. Video showed a blast striking a car park where scores of people were queuing. Reuters was able to confirm it and filmed outside a supermarket in Kharkiv. Western sanctions have isolated Russia from global trade to a degree never been visited on such a large economy. Russia warned that billing in rubles for natural gas exports to heavily dependent Europe could be just days away, leaving buyers wondering how they could get their hands on the currency. China is the biggest power not to have condemned the Russian invasion and has repeatedly voiced opposition to the sanctions. The Reuters report that Sinopec had suspended discussions about investments, potentially worth $500 million, and was the first concrete sign that sanctions are interfering with trade between Moscow and Beijing. Beijing has insisted it will maintain trade links, but behind the scenes it is pressing Chinese companies to tread carefully. Companies with rigidly Companies will rigidly follow Beijing's foreign policy in this crisis, said an executive at a Chinese state oil company. There is no room whatsoever for companies to take any initiatives in terms of new investment. I should say not. Well, that mouthful. In more war news, Biden lands in Poland with military support high on agenda. U.S. President Joe Biden landed in Poland on Friday to get a first-hand look at international efforts to help some of the millions of Ukrainian refugees fleeing war in their country and speak to American troops bolstering NATO's eastern flank. His first stop was to meet soldiers from the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division stationed in the area of Reznow Airport as part of NATO's protection of the alliance's eastern flank. TV footage showed film sharing pizza and chatting with several military personnel. Biden's schedule was delayed after the plane carrying Polish President Andrzej Duda was turned back en route to Reznow and made an emergency landing in Warsaw. Duda later boarded a different aircraft and headed back to eastern Poland. An official in his office said Duda had not been in any danger. Biden was due to receive a briefing on the humanitarian response to help civilians sheltering from Russian attacks inside Ukraine and to respond to the growing flow of refugees fleeing Ukraine. Biden told reporters in Brussels on Thursday that his visit will reinforce my commitment to have the United States make sure we are a major piece of dealing with the relocation of all those folks, as well as humanitarian assistance needed both inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine. In the evening, Biden was to travel to the capital Warsaw for talks with Duda. On Saturday, he was scheduled to give what the White House described as a major address. Poland hopes that Biden's visit will underline the security assurances already made by the United States that it will defend every inch of NATO territory. Warsaw is keen to see even more U.S. troops stationed on NATO's eastern flank. Poland is also likely to raise the idea of international peacekeeping mission involving troops being stationed in Ukraine, an idea first proposed by ruling party leader Jarosław Kaczynski during a trip to Kyiv. En route to Poland on Air Force One, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan briefed reporters. Asked whether Russia would try to bomb convoys carrying supplies to Ukraine over land through NATO countries, Sullivan said, "We are doing contingency planning for the possibility that Russia chooses to strike NATO territory in that context or in any other context." And the president has been about as clear as one can be about his absolute determination to respond decisively alongside the other members of our alliance if Russia attacks NATO, Sullivan said. He also suggested the United States and its allies could still impose new measures to punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. Of course, there are additional measures to tighten the screws on sanctions, and we will be constantly reviewing those, he said. Moscow calls its actions in Ukraine a special military operation to disarm its neighbor. Kyiv and its Western allies call it an unprovoked war of aggression and say Russia's true aim was to overthrow the government of what President Vladimir Putin regards as an illegitimate state. got about 5 more minutes. Yeah, here's a good one. Supreme Court Justice Thomas's wife urged Trump White House to overturn 2020 election. Um, March 24, Virginia Thomas, the wife of conservative Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, urged former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to work to overturn the results of the 2020 election in a series of text messages, the Washington Post and CBS News reported on Thursday. The messages, sent in the weeks following the November 3rd presidential election, show that Thomas advised Meadows to make a plan and release the Kraken in a bid to preserve Donald Trump's presidency, the Post and CBS News reported. Virginia Thomas, a conservative activist and attorney, could not immediately be reached for comment. Now President Joe Biden was projected to win the race on November 7, 2020. Sounds like Sydney and her team are getting inundated with evidence of fraud. Make a plan, release the Kraken, and save us from the left taking America down, she said in one of 29 messages shared between the two, according to the Post. Sidney Powell, who represented Trump's campaign when he sought to overturn the election results, filed lawsuits challenging courts in multiple states in support of Trump's false claims of widespread election fraud. She had previously vowed to release the Kraken to expose the alleged fraud, a reference to the sea monster of Scandinavian folklore. The messages were handed over to the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol, according to the Post and CBS, who said, without elaborating, that they had obtained copies of the messages. Reuters could not independently verify the reports. A spokesperson for the January 6 committee declined to comment. Reuters sought comment from Meadows at the Conservative Partnership Institute, an organization that helps elect conservatives to office where Meadows now serves as a partner, but was unable to immediately reach him. An attorney for Meadows did not return a request for comment. The messages do not directly reference Thomas's husband or the Supreme Court, according to the Post. Trump's campaign distanced itself from Powell after she claimed without evidence at a November 19, 2020 news conference that electronic voting systems had switched millions of ballots to Biden. The news comes almost a week after Justice Thomas was admitted to a Washington hospital. The state of Thomas's health was not immediately clear. Okay. All right, so that's some Reuters news for you. Half-hour Reuters news. I don't know about you, but I feel caught up. I feel I'm all caught up. There's number 4. But I just ran the log. You just saw the log. There it is. Yesterday was the 24th. There's number 5. Now we're going to go back to log entry. There's number 5 and there's number 1. There it is. Okay. Says 2808. Oops. Nope. Return. So it starts at 250 and 2012. So we're looking for 32. Down here. One. This is 205. So we want to get another 100. So let's go 3170. And this thing just won't there. It says 28, it's close to 25, so we're good to go. Yeah. Yeah. Hey! Okay. So that's exciting. I mean, that's exciting. Please send all comments to charlie@cadd.me. Post them. How about that? Okay, let's end this.